We have a very special presentation to one of San Mateo County's own. So this is a little something we call the Connect Award. When Warren and I were discussing our vision for Connect15 2 years ago, we both saw the need to recognize individuals and organizations that are making a difference in government through the use of technology. As we heard this morning, the technology is all around us. It's what we do with it that matters. We're looking for individuals and organizations that have not only embraced technology, but have used the technology to enhance and improve how government functions and improve the quality of life of the people that we serve here in San Mateo County. So how is technology allowing government to be more responsive and better address constituent needs? How have services been elevated? We're looking for vision and leadership. And equally important, we are looking for results. We're looking for those that have set the standard for the use of technology in public service. I think our selection of Anne-Marie Despain and her team at the San Mateo County Library fit that description perfectly. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my partner here to talk about our honoree today.
Thank you, Kevin. So our honoree today is Anne-Marie Despain and the entire San Mateo County Library team. And Anne-Marie, why don't you just make your way up here, but maybe we should all give it up right now for Anne-Marie. And as she comes up, I'll tell you a little bit about her. She's been in the library business for some 30 years, and 6 years ago, she assumed the position of Director of Library Services at the San Mateo County Library. And the San Mateo County Library is a joint powers authority comprised of the cities of Atherton, Belmont, Brisbane, East Palo Alto, Foster City, Half Moon Bay, Millbrae, Pacifica, Portola Valley, San Carlos, Woodside, and the unincorporated areas of San Mateo County. It's recognized as one of the nation's top public libraries by the Library Journal, and the San Mateo County Library is currently ranked 15th nationwide and 2nd in California among peer libraries. Anne-Marie oversees the district's 12 community libraries, a bookmobile, a virtual library, and provides equal access to services and technology and ensuring the library stays dedicated to its role as a learning institution. Some of the unique things that have happened under Anne-Marie's leadership has been really heavily involved in the implementation of various technologies and tools. And let me just share a couple with you. She increased bandwidth. I'm not sure what this means, Kevin. I'm just kidding. At all libraries. She launched a laptop e-reader and hotspot lending programs. Let me share with you just for a moment what that is. Kids without access at home, internet services at home, can check out from the library's mobile hotspots. So they can take the mobile hotspot home and have internet access. How cool is that, right? She's got, 3D printers. She's got it all going on down there in the library system. They do gaming, music, filmmaker classes. They have early literacy applications for education of the young folks. And they have really great programs throughout the system for kids. This summer, they did, as well as last summer, a summer reading program for kids at the libraries, North Fair Oaks, East Palo Alto, and other libraries throughout the county. And I had a chance to visit one of those programs, and it was just amazing to see what the kids were doing, what they were reading, the art that they were creating. They got a lunch during the day. A lot of parents came. It was an amazing thing, and it was thanks to Anne-Marie's leadership that happened. As one of the largest providers of free internet in the county, San Mateo County Library offers over 500 public computers and provides thousands with wireless access every day. Anne-Marie holds a master's degree in library science from Emporia State University and a Bachelor of Science in Management from the University of Utah. I don't know where Irving Torres is, but go Utes, right? Throughout her career, she has championed risk-taking, increased access for all, created welcoming spaces that promote community pride, and expanded the library's role as an early learning leader. So with that, let me call Anne Marie up here and just say, Anne Marie, on behalf of the Board of Supervisors and the California State Assembly, if I could talk for the Assembly, congratulations on this award, and thank you for setting the bar so high for us all. Thank you. So we have this beautiful award for Anne Marie. When we come to visit, we want to make sure this is on your bookshelf, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So congratulations.
Thanks.
Thank you for everything.
Is this on? Okay. Thank you, Warren and Kevin. This is such a great honor. I'm accepting it on behalf of the San Mateo County Library. There are some governing board members here today, as well as operation committee members. And then one of our staff members. I mean, none of this could happen without an amazing staff. And so I want to make sure that I introduce Sylvia Urena, who's in the back. She's our IT manager, and she's our IT manager, and working with a very small staff, they have really pushed the tech revolution at the San Mateo County Library and created a reputation in our organization throughout the profession as an innovator and a leader. I want to just share two stories. I am just so thrilled to be here and hear the conversation about reading, early literacy. It's been a treat. This is my second year, and it's a wonderful conference. So it's really great to also be honored as well. There are two stories because the theme is changing environments and how technology has changed the way we do things. Libraries are an amazing example of that. I have worked in libraries for 30 years. I often don't like to say that because it dates me, but I started working in a public library as a high school student, and one of my jobs was to stamp those date due slips. Do you remember those? In the back of the pocket, in the back of the book, in the pocket. I remember when we transitioned to computer generated. And now we don't even have date due slips anymore. You can sign up for a text message and get notified before your books are even due. And with the return of a text message, you can renew all your items. So amazing changes have happened. Warren mentioned the 1 gig. All of the libraries in the county now have that connection. And recent Saturday, it was about 2 weeks ago, at 3 of the libraries in the county, you could go and view a live streamed performance of an SF Jazz collaborative. Their family matinee series, they streamed it. The audience was also able to interact with the musicians and participate in the Q&A. The libraries that benefited from that were the Belmont Library, the East Palo Alto Library, as well as the downtown Maine Redwood City Library. An amazing program that wouldn't be possible without the technology that we have today. Essentially just gaining access to a world-renowned institution and a performance like that. The other program that I'm really excited about, besides all of the Wi-Fi lending, the hotspots, because we've been talking about early literacy, and we are a proud supporter and participant of the Big Lift, we have launched a new program called Talk, Read, Sing in our library, and you may have heard about programs that are addressing the word gap. Essentially, that children of lower income families hear less words during those critical early years than their more affluent children. And so with the use of technology, and we partnered with a research firm out of Boulder, Colorado, the kids are signed up, the families are signed up, and they wear a little vest that has what we call a talk pedometer. And it essentially records the number of words that are spoken in the home, and then we set goals with those families to exceed those. And we've had one round of program, and the results are just astounding. 70% of those families have met those goals. So change, technology is alive and well, and really, I still hear people ask if libraries are relevant in this age, and they certainly are. And if anything, the digital media technology is creating more opportunities for exciting, innovative programs. So again, thank you, Warren and Kevin, for this award, and I will certainly display it and share it with the rest of the San Mateo County Library staff.
Okay, thank you so much. Libraries truly are beacons of democracy, and more important now than ever before, and we're so very proud of our work at the county library. So we are going to transition to our next panel entitled The Next Frontier, Open Data, Big Data, and Data Sharing. It's my pleasure to introduce Cameron Johnson to moderate. With all the talk about data, we thought a conversation about what the terminology means and how information can be harnessed would be useful to those of us in government. So our moderator, Cameron Johnson, was elected to the San Carlos City Council in November 2013. For his day job, he is Director of Product Innovation at Netflix. Prior to Netflix, Cameron was Director of Product Management at Yahoo. Cameron also serves on the San Mateo County Mental Health and Substance Abuse Recovery Commission. He previously served on the San Carlos Economic Development Advisory Commission. His Twitter profile begins one foot in Silicon Valley, the other in City Hall. Cameron has an MBA from Stanford and a BA in political science from Reed College. I'm pleased that Cameron could join us today to bring us his experience and insight in both public and private sectors and provide some insights into how to harness the power of technology for government. So Cameron Johnson, come on up.
All right, is this thing on? There we go. I'd like to ask my panelists to come up. First, I want to say I'm on Anne Marie's board of directors, and I think that recognition is really well deserved. She's doing a hell of a job with the county library system. I want to thank Warren and Kevin for inviting me to moderate a panel this year at Connect15, and thank everybody for coming. I was at work at Netflix about an hour and a half ago. I was talking to my boss, and I said, I got to go because I got to go moderate a panel about the use of data in government. And he said, oh, you mean the NSA? And I thought that was really sort of a telling comment and why this topic is so interesting, because here's a guy who works for a big innovative technology company that uses data constantly to help improve the service, to recommend what movies you should watch, all sorts of different ways to use data. But when he thinks about data in a government context, he immediately goes to the negative, and he thinks, oh, well, this is, Big Brother, government spying on me, and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's, for those of us who are in government who care about technology, that's our challenge, which is the technology has enabled us to do so many interesting things to help people to solve big public policy problems. But it also raises lots of concerns about privacy and other things. So with that, I want to introduce our panelists and ask them to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about where do they work, what's the mission of their organization, and I think this is going to be a good discussion. We've got a lot of good different perspectives. So we'll kick it off with Deanne, and I'm going to move over to this side.
On? Hello, hello. All right, great. I'm Diane Eisnor, the Director of Growth for Waze. For anyone who does not know, we are a crowdsourced navigation real-time traffic application that is collecting a tremendous amount of anonymized information based on speeds, which we use to try to save people time every day based on the folks that are already out on the road, knowing where the accidents are, the hazards, et cetera. We are going to show just a quick video now of how we're trying to take that 5 minutes a day and that data we have to turn it into millions of hours at the city level. So if we could just roll that video. really is a next natural evolution of Waze, right? So Waze itself, you have all of these users that are coming together in this driver community and sharing information to make things better for each other.
The Waze model works because it's this unique mix of really smart technology and really smart people. And so when you overlay the human layer and you're thinking about mobile technology on a daily basis, we have insights that pick up where the algorithm leaves off.
When you can elevate that to the city level, we're talking about saving time for millions of people.
Our drivers are out on the streets every hour of every day, reporting the most accurate information on closures and congestion. We are taking that information and delivering it to the government officials who can address those incidents in real time.
Boston is a city of around 600,000 residents, but during a typical workday, we grow to over 1 million people in the metro area. Waze has allowed us to rapidly iterate through experiments to see what sort of effect interventions have on congestion and traffic.
When we started this, it was about getting the initial experiments off the ground. We didn't expect that so quickly we would have cities changing garbage collection routes, that we would have them redistributing traffic personnel, that we would have 911 systems relying on this data.
Genesis is a software company that provides solutions to help first responders by putting Waze inside our Genesis Pulse product. Our first responders are saving 5 minutes, and that saves lives.
Waze's crowdsourced platform is particularly powerful in times of emergency. For Hurricane Joaquin in South Carolina, we coordinated efforts between FEMA, South Carolina's DOT, and the Columbia Fire Department to aggregate over 1,000 road closures on our platform.
We had a major snow last March. Seeing the data come in from Waze every 2 minutes allows us to grab user reports, and then we can respond to those reports in a timely manner, and that makes the roads safer.
What I think is interesting about getting all of these partners together is the fact that they can share commonalities and also learn things from each other's experiences that can be applicable to a completely different problem.
We're providing a tremendous amount of new data and giving them new opportunities to analyze that and see what the future of the data-driven city really is.
It is one thing for a company to say that they're trying to change the world, but in our case, we're actually sitting down with partners and having measurable results every day.
At the core, CCP has the same mission as Waze, which is to save people time every day. It's showing us what our new goals are going to be. New forms of safety, new forms of urban mobility, helping cities become a lab for making lives better. So you get the idea. We're past the point of collecting lots of data, and now we have to put it to action with the government partners.
Good afternoon. My name is Kate Maeder. I'm a political strategist at Storefront Political Media in San Francisco. And I can really speak to sort of because I'm a strategist as well as we're an ad agency. So I can talk a lot about political targeting and how the industry has really changed over the past few years and the past decade about using big data because we have the data, we can just act on it in smarter ways than we ever have done before. We also launched this new platform called iagreetosee.com. We're trying to build an audience of people who like watching political ads. In addition to some of the things that were, right? You're not the only ones that laugh at that idea. It's great. But definitely check it out. It's a lot of fun. And sort of talking about this idea of crowdsourcing, when I ran Assemblymember Phil Ting's campaign, we launched a platform called Reset San Francisco, which was all about engaging residents on crowdsourcing a policy platform. So looking forward to our conversation today.
My name is Nguyen. I am the Director of Child Welfare for the County of San Mateo. I'm based out of the Human Services Agency. And our primary goal is really child protection. So some of you may have heard the term child protective services, et cetera. So our staff are responsible for looking into allegations of child abuse and neglect, and then trying to address some of the issues and making sure that children are safe.
Mike Dougherty from OpenGov. A pleasure to be here. And OpenGov is a software as a service that helps governments tell their story, the enterprise and the public, where the money comes from and where it goes. And we were actually founded in the aftermath of the Great Recession, as a couple of Stanford students won a grant to try and study and make sense of some of the financial data within government to try and see if there would be ways to better forecast events like the Great Recession. And what they found was there are a lot of stovepiped accounting systems, enterprise systems that are very difficult to get information out of in ways that are meaningful for department heads and the public. So we work with our customers, or 500 or so around the country, to help them not only enable the enterprise to have quick and easy access to the data and information to make better decisions, but then also to translate to the public to help them tell their story to the public.
All right, great. So let's dive in. So Diane, can you, from a sort of through a data lens, can you give us a peek under the hood of how Waze works? And in doing so, can you talk a little bit about what does the term big data mean to Waze?
Sure. So for those of you who have never used it, it's like any navigation service on a mobile device. You tell it where you want to go, so I type in SFO. And as you drive, it's giving you speed information. It's calculating the route based on all the other drivers that are on the road using the app. So you don't have to do anything. Don't touch it. Just listen to turn right, turn left, and it's all entirely crowdsourced. If you're not driving, or there's a gesture-based method as well, where you can report on traffic, report on a hazard, report on an accident. So that's giving even more information out there. So really, there's no behavior change required. You just kind of turn it on, drive, and you're guided by all of the information of the other drivers out there. Big data to us just means, how can you get the amount of information? So it's basically like this. What we used to have were sensors that were in the roads and major highways or on primary roads, but this is not scalable, and it's too expensive from a physical infrastructure perspective to rely on. So if you can actually tap into everyone who's already driving in the road, that's going to give you a quantity of data you've never had before, and give you real information about where roads are needed, where the closures are, whatever it is that you need to keep people on the move on the road. And so that's really it for us.
Great. So, one way to think about it is, well, everyone's got a smartphone, right? So we can collect this data. Could Waze have existed, 10 years ago? And beyond just the smartphone, are there big technological leaps that have allowed you to kind of pull all this information in real time and be able to present it back to people?
So no, it couldn't have existed 10 years ago. Waze is not a new idea. We've been talking about this for over 10 years. But without the pervasiveness of the smartphone, you just didn't have access to that much information from the crowd. It was too much friction. And you would have to ask people to type. Well, there were all kinds of bad things that shouldn't happen. So the smartphone helped that. In general, cloud computing, being able to aggregate all of this information in real time, provide it to somebody at such a fast pace, right? And that amount, and all over the world. If it weren't for the cloud movement, we wouldn't have been able to do anything with this.
Great. Okay, Kate, so I'm an elected official. How many elected officials are in the room? Raise your hand.
Wow.
Okay. So I think we should hit you up for some free political advice.
That's what I'm here for.
So, if you read the newspaper, it seems like, whether it's the Obama campaign or whomever, we're doing super micro targeting, figuring out voters what magazine subscriptions they use, and compiling all that information. How much of that are you seeing in a day-to-day basis, and how has the use of data in political campaigns kind of changed over your career?
Well, for anyone who's really paying attention to the 2016 election cycle, you know that more money is going to be spent on political advertising than ever before, tens of billions of dollars. And what it really comes down to is a few things. One, people are now empowered with the tools to opt out of political communication and advertising in general. You have DVR, you have ad blockers, you have direct mail. We're getting saturated, so we're just throwing away. Nobody's actually looking at it. And now with big data, you have access to the voter file. For all the electeds in the room, you know that. You can see voting history. And you can see who's likely to vote, what their demographic data. But now by partnering with, at Storefront Political Media, one thing that I've done is I've built an influencer database. I've mapped out who the most influential people are in California. And what I've done is that I've taken, this is where the NSA kind of comes into play a little bit, right? But what you can do now is that you can take the voter file as your base source of data, and you can match it with third-party data to kind of do some persona targeting.
Can you give some examples?
Some examples, all right. So, Twitter, any kind of data on Twitter is public. And some of you know about clout scores, and it's their own internal algorithm of what you're influential about. And now imagine if you can overlay that with the voter file. And when you're running for office, you don't want to talk to everybody. You just want to geofence certain zip codes. So I can say, hey, candidate X, here's a list of the top, and you can create these scores and algorithms, and here are the top 100 influential people on the environment who have 1,000 or more Twitter followers in these zip codes. Why don't you give them a call and invite them to your environmental town hall? That's just one example that we can do at a really micro level. And going beyond that, some other growing challenges, people aren't in front of their TV sets all the time. So you have to have this multi-channel approach when you're doing advertising, right? From the mobile targeting to TV to pre-roll, you name it. I can go on and on.
Let me ask one follow-up question. So on the targeting piece, when you're trying to get that political message, what kinds of data are you queuing off of? What do you know about me that means that I'm going to get this ad on my phone or on when I go to, whatever website?
Well, in addition to traditional research methods, right, like polling and that sort of thing, studies and media consumption is changing, and then you can follow those trends. For example, I know that you're a young person. I could probably predict that you don't have a landline phone. I don't know if you have cable, see? And so, I probably would just serve you some mobile ads and figure out, well, how do you spend your day and how do you consume your media, and then target the right message with you in that way.
Great. Wow, amazing. All right, switching to Locke. So, you're deep in sort of frontline public policy, solving, service delivery for real families, coming up with strategies. People have been using data for thousands of years to try to solve problems. So what I'm interested to hear about is, what new tools do you have available to you that you didn't have, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, a generation? And how are you as a, administrator or public policy person using those tools to help create good public policy?
I think one of the biggest aspects is just the availability of data itself. Years ago, we used to essentially have to go to staff who would go into files, manual files, and pull out pieces of information and then send it to somebody else to try to compile that information. Now we have just a sheer, lots of information that is out there. For example, we know that San Mateo County has over 750,000 people in our county. It's the 14th largest county in California. It is actually larger than 4 states, so we would actually be state number 47 in terms of that. But if you looked on the child welfare side, in terms of foster care rates, we actually have the 4th lowest foster care rates in California. And we're only larger than counties like Alpine County and Sierra County, which have no children in foster care. So the availability of the information is out there. We just have to try to leverage that. Another example is that we look at unemployment and the economy. And part of the reason why we look at the economy is that there's this notion out there that as the economy gets worse, there's more child abuse and neglect. And as the economy gets better, there's less child abuse and neglect. And if you tracked unemployment nationally, California, et cetera, every recession that happens, after the recession, there's this peak in unemployment. So technically, there should be sort of this trend that you see as well. So one of the, yeah. Could you cue up the next slide, please? So my colleagues here can't see that, but what I'm showing here is from 2005 to present, that green bar that you see is the last Great Recession. And what you see in unemployment is this fall or decrease in employment before the recession. It rises and it peaks after recession, and then it falls again. And if I was doing trend analysis using big data, child abuse and neglect cases should fall and rise at the same level. What you actually see is this. Okay? It's the exact opposite. Hopefully you're able to see that, right? Just double check here. It disappeared. There we go. So that blue line that you see there is actually the number of open child abuse cases, and it's the exact opposite. The mathematics, for those of you who are interested in that, basically says for every 1% rise in unemployment, I'll see an actual drop of 46 open Child Protective Service cases. And for every fall or every decrease of 1% in unemployment, there'll actually be a rise of about 46 cases. And that's been true in the last 11 years. And so if I were to look at shared data and say, well, there's all this information about unemployment out there, and if I had unemployment and if I were able to work with you, the business community, and see that you had all these job openings, I should be able to match those who are unemployed with those available jobs. But according to this, as soon as I do that, I'll drive unemployment down, and guess what? My Child Protective Service cases will go up, right? So that doesn't make sense. Part of the reason why we may be seeing that, at least here in our county, is that as the economy is getting better, people are getting jobs, but they're not getting $100,000 jobs. They are getting jobs that are disqualifying them from the safety nets of federal benefits. So we've actually heard anecdotally about people who have gotten a promotion to supervisor, and they've gone to their employer and basically said, you know, give me the promotion on paper, but don't give me that $200 a month salary increase because that will kick me off benefits in terms of that. So, but one of the nice things that Dr. David Satcher, who is a U.S. Surgeon General, said a number of years ago was that there are certainly risk factors, right? Poverty and things of that nature. But risk factors are not predictive factors because of protective factors. Right, so you heard earlier from the county librarian, as well as our one of our challenges that in terms of by age 3, there's this process about wanting to have more children listen, read, and sing more. And the full statistic is that by the age of 3, low-income children hear 30 million less words than their high-income or moderate-income counterparts. And by the age of 3, 80% of their brains will have fully developed at that particular time. So that's a risk factor. So the protective factor then is that we're able to identify that and then work with the county libraries to give them this, tuckometer or word meter or whatever, or what you had said, to try to be able to say, yeah, this is a low-income child, but they don't have to have adverse outcomes if we're able to identify protective factors.
And so just as a quick follow-up, so these types of insights that you're able to get, do you think that the county would have had the capability 10 or 20 years ago to kind of reach the same level of insights? It sounds like what you're saying is now with the availability of data and the ability to do this analysis quickly, you're able to gain insights and drive policy recommendations a lot quicker. Is that the case?
Yes, but the irony is that even though we may have some of the information now, the public still wants that level of accountability. And we're still looking to work with all of the folks here to be able to really develop even more tools for us to be able to then say, okay, we've identified some of the risk factors. Sure. How can we work to prevent that?
Okay, great. Mike, so the city of San Carlos, for its budget, puts on a 300-page document that's in 12-point font, and that's how you dig through it with charts. So I know what your company does is it allows us, if we wanted to become a client, to create really cool charts, bar graphs, and interactive ways for the public to be able to see, how are my tax dollars being spent? How's the government working? So, sell me. Why should why should the city of San Carlos adopt your service? And specifically, one thing that I'm interested in is, who's this for? Is this for me as an elected official? Is it for my staff? Is it for the general public? Is it all of the above?
No, good question. So putting my sales hat on for a moment, no, with respect to municipalities and using OpenGov, historically budget data was in these PDFs. Originally it was probably in a bound copy at a county office or city office. And what we're focused on doing is translating that into modern web-based tools for easy access. So if a city wants to publish the key budget data, whether it be the annual report, the balance sheet, and so forth, and make that available to the public, and present certain representations of that data to tell your story to the public of how their taxpayer dollars are being spent, and that is an investment that seems to be worth doing, then by all means proceed with something like OpenGov. More importantly, actually, we've actually gone beyond that level of transparency reporting and are now focused on our intelligence and comparisons and performance data. So, the budget is one place to start, but then, government officials oftentimes have, even department heads and staff, have a hard time making sense of the 70,000 rows of data from their Excel file that they just landed on their desk. And so how do you give those folks the tools to quickly access that information and at a click or two, and then make comparisons with it against the budget, against performance metrics, and ensure that you're on target on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis. And then with respect to big data, there are a number of trends that are developing. One is the development of trusted communities and network effects of data, and this has been touched on a little bit. Well, with a OpenGov community of governments where we have over 500 governments on the platform, governments can then look at other governments of their size, run comparisons, and through this community of governments then leverage the network effect of information sharing for best practices and so forth.
I think it's fascinating, but I'm not sure you answered my question. So it sounds like an awesome tool. One way to look at it is, well, it's a tool that staff should just have, and it's not accessible by the public, right? It's a way to analyze our data. It's our budget, a way to compare against other cities. And then there's another version which says, no, this is actually the way in which the public should learn and interact. Can you talk about why is it that this, or what are the benefits necessarily for making this available to the public?
Sure. Well, I think that what oftentimes happens out here in the public is that everyone in the public who is not involved with public policy is very focused on their day-to-day lives. And you hear news reports about spending, about cuts, and so on and so forth. And a lot of times that information through the media or Twitter or whoever has the loudest voice in social media is not backed up by the facts. And so what tools like OpenGov provide is that single source of truth, because it is the fiscal, financial data that's being represented, to be able to present the real facts rather than allowing a rumor, social media, and so forth to overtake the reality of the good that's being done and the various challenges and hurdles that government face.
Do you think because the public and people who use these tools, because they can kind of interact with it, they can dig down, they can change the graph, does that create some level of legitimacy versus just sort of seeing what we put out with a press release or buried in some documents?
Sure, absolutely. A couple of examples. Any citizen can go to sausalito.opengov.com and pull up the balance sheet and look at the investment portfolio and ensure that the city is in compliance with its regulations for its investments. You can quickly and easily access overtime spend and evaluate how the city or the jurisdiction is spending its overtime. And so it provides that single source of truth for everybody. So in that sense, it is has that democratization effect of sharing the financial information truth with the citizenry. It reduces FOIA requests. It can actually be used in city council meetings and so forth to actually present the data.
Great. So I want to go back to Diane, and I want to sort of ask the entire panel what is essentially how I opened the NSA question, which is, the idea that everything that I do on my phone or every time I go to a website, every time I look for a pair of shoes and then I go around the web and that pair of shoes is like following me on every website, creates, I think, justifiably concerns about privacy for a lot of people. So, how do you think about that from Waze's perspective? Because as you said, your business is built on the idea that you're tracking where I'm driving. So is that okay? And how do you talk to your users about that?
So one thing is that we are not storing personally identifiable information, and we're definitely not sharing it. So we can't store it, so we're not sharing it. So that's one thing. The kinds of information that we're talking about sharing are someone reported a pothole, someone reported an accident. So we're trying to steer clear of that a little bit and make sure that that we're only sharing relevant information. And I have a hypothesis that people want to share this information. They're willing to report the pothole. They're willing to give that information, but they expect something from their government officials in exchange. So that's what we're trying to facilitate. Just generally in Waze, there's an entire range. We're clearly in a transition about how we think about privacy as a society, right? So we've got those users who are begging for Facebook Connect logins and G+ logins. And then we have those who want to...
Can you explain a little bit what that means for...
So for example, a request from many of our users was, let me see my Facebook friends on a map. So, let me share a drive with someone. So if I'm going to be 10 minutes late coming home, before I start my drive, I allow my kids to watch me so that they know when I'm coming home, for example. So I don't have to text them or anything. And these are requests that are coming in from people, whether it's their social network or whether it's a one-on-one share.
And so what would it mean, though, if I connected my Facebook account with Waze?
Well, that means in our case that we would be able to have access to your friends on an as-needed basis when they are within, I think now it's like a 1 kilometer radius or something like that. So you'd only see them if they were close by. And you can opt into that. That's nothing you have to do, but we had to provide that. On the far other end of the spectrum, we have people who have asked for invisibility mode, which you will now see, which means don't even show me as an anonymous Wazer on a map. I don't want any trace. I don't want my information stored. And so if you're in invisibility mode, you won't show up on the map even anonymously, and your information won't be stored. So we're trying to accommodate that whole range. For the most part, people are very happy to report and to share. I just want to mention one thing back to the analysis, though, if you don't mind, real quick. So we recently had, we have 55 partners in the program now. We got them together, and it's Jakarta, and it's Rio, and it's LA, and it's the Kentucky DOT, a wide range of people. And only one have data analysts on staff, and it's the city of Boston. And so it's a big problem if you're not opening the data to the citizens at the same time as the government. It's not sure that you're going to be able to even understand what's there. And so I'm a big proponent of the folks within government that are trying to get the resources to have data analysts on staff, because it's critical. I think it's one of the most important roles of government.
Yeah, I think also just to add to that, it's really important that you give users, as if we're just talking about online, the ability to opt in to all these things, rather than just what you were talking about with your shoes is called remarketing. And so whenever you go to a website, if you look at the terms of service, they attach what's called a cookie to you. And so you can, they travel. I always say the analogy is almost like tagging a dolphin. When you tag a dolphin, it swims away, but you always know where it is. And so that's what you can do with digital advertising right now. And I think from the government side, open data is spectacular because it does create this government transparency and also accountability. But to your point, I think we need to empower our elected officials and their staff to reduce this friction between the people and the elected officials.
So let me challenge something that you said. You said it has to be opt-in, right? But so at the beginning you said, well, hey, we grab the voter file and then we look up your name and then we figure out who your Twitter followers are and are you influential and what your demographic is, and then we put together a political ad and we make sure you see it. So how is that opt-in?
So it's twofold. When you, I have a good answer actually, that when you register to vote, you're opting in. Everything on the voter file is public information. But the problem, though, is that many voters don't understand that. And so I think there's a lot of voter education that we have to do, because if you're an elected official or you're a candidate for office and you want to email voters, you're legally able to do that. And a lot of voters, actually do engage, and they open the emails and they'll opt in, to your message or come to your event. But I get a number of responses, like, let's just say a number of them are really ticked off, and they don't understand that it was acquired, their email addresses were acquired legally. And it's all public record. When you make a campaign contribution, that's public.
And I think, my broader question, back to Diane's analogy is, well, there's a spectrum and different people want different things. Some people want to be completely anonymous and cut off, and some people don't mind, having access to information. I don't know that it's realistic to say, hey, if you don't want your information made available, you should just remove yourself from the voter rolls and never vote. And I think one question I have is, what direction, and this is sort of a question for the whole panel, and I'd be interested to hear your guys' thoughts about privacy too, but what direction do you see this going? Do you see this evolving to say, hey, there's less privacy available, more kind of understanding of who people are and targeting things towards them, or are we moving to more safeguards and more ability to control your data?
I think one thing especially that you said is that if you are going to engage people, and I want to frame it as engagement, right? Especially around civic engagement. I think that's where the country is moving in terms of voter communication, is that you have to give them something of value at the end of the day.
So an example of this is just a few years ago, UC Berkeley did a study of all births in California. They looked at birth certificates. They were able to identify 6 risk factors, and they found that 15% of all Californians had at least 3 risk factors, and it was this 15% that led to 50% of all actual Child Protective Service contact in the next 5 years. Okay. So 1 in 2 chance. So one of the fundamental fears is for us as government is that, well, if we get that data and we get one birth certificate about this one child, and they have 3 of these risk factors, are we going to send out Child Protective Services to that family and say, well, we might as well intervene now because you're going to show up?
Minority Report.
Yes. But the point is, if we know that there are risk factors, we might be able to then say, do you have all the benefits that are available to you? Do you have access to CalFresh? Do you have access to health insurance? Do you have access to housing, and so on and so forth? And it is a constant sort of push and pull with privacy. Does the family want to have that level of government sort of intervention? I don't want you to have that information on me, even if the purpose is to give me the benefits that I want. And so it is a struggle.
And how do you define that line? Is that defined for you legally, or is there ongoing kind of professional conversation about it? Or
there's continued professional conversation, right? From the public health side, there is a similar model about communicable diseases. If you know that somebody has been exposed to the flu or some other aspect, then you say, well, I'll go to whoever it is that you were exposed to and make sure that they come in. There was a measles outbreak, some hitting bark, and it came out at Disneyland. And the public health department had a very aggressive approach towards identifying those people who may have been exposed. And sort of the same here with child protection. But the point is not to intervene from Child Protective Services, but to be able to, again, provide those sort of protective factors to help with that. So from my stance is that it's more of what we can do for not only the community, but also the individual.
Okay. Yeah, Mike, weigh in here. I don't know if you guys have specific privacy concerns or how OpenGov thinks about it, but I'm also just interested, you're working largely with a lot of financial data, which isn't necessarily that sensitive today, but I suspect you guys have ambitions to do more opening of government that may move into some of these privacy areas. So,
yeah, and happy to start with the financial piece. Yeah. I mean, I think that, to large part, we thankfully don't have to deal with that issue because a lot of this is, FOIA type, very generic and can be open to the public. Really, I don't mean to get into the weeds too much in this kind of panel, but it really depends on the data quality. I've talked to a jurisdiction that has no method of redacting personally identifiable information because the legacy systems they're on and the way they've built up their processes over time muddle key data into multiple fields that can't be sorted and can't be deleted, so it can actually never be redacted. And obviously that's it's not here, believe me. It's not in this, and it's not even in California, so don't worry. But seriously, it really comes down to data quality and to the degree to which entities are complying with various statutes and regulations and best practices to ensure that any data that can be shared can be redacted cleanly, easily, and protected accordingly.
That makes sense. So I want to open up for questions in a second, but I wanted to ask each of my panelists to talk about, where is this going? So how cool is Waze going to be in 10 years? How targeted is the advertising going to be in 10 years? What amazing insights are you going to be able to gain from innovations in your ability to analyze data, and how open can government be? So we'll start with Diane.
Waze is going to be really cool in 10 years. To be a little more specific, what I hope is that we're just at the beginning of this ability to take action. I see that cities are going to be much more data-driven and that they're going to be much more dynamic, right? So the public facilities might be more portable, and you can change them as the demographics of your city changes. And that data like ours will allow that to be a real possibility. And like we mentioned in the video there, we've got cities that really they have already changed their garbage collection routes just because they never had access before to be able to overlay neighborhood information and reports over traffic jams. And so, these small things at the very least will have a much better reduction of congestion and much less friction in our mobility. So I hope.
So one thing I definitely want to address too is that everybody has a choice. If you get an email, you can opt out. If you get a phone call, you say, don't call me again. You get scrubbed from the list. There's the national do not call list. And I think that's really important that everybody has a choice, because not only can you, in terms of privacy concerns, opt out of different sort of communication tactics, but also there are a lot of people out there who want information. And I think that's sort of where we're moving in terms of political communication, and even maybe on the government side too. It's why we've created something called iagreetosee.com, because there are people out there who love watching political ads. And I think where we're moving in terms of political communication, and the business side is already doing this, especially I'll just keep going back to the shoes analogy. And the political side of things is slowly but surely catching up, and government will too, and how many decades it's getting there. But I want us to think about the idea of predictive algorithms, whereas we're going to predict which issues you care about, which candidates you're likely to vote for, and then we're going to serve you up information on those folks. So predictive algorithms using big data, because we have the data, we just have to make it actionable.
I have a fundamental belief that in some point in the future we'll be able to provide benefits to people. But one of the major aspects that we're facing right now, and it's certainly true in many fields, is that we don't have enough social workers. We don't have enough social service providers. So if we flip the conversation, what if we were able to use big data to identify future social workers even before they enter the universities, even as young as when they are in the communities? Because one of the fundamental aspects on our end is that we want people who come from the community to provide services to the community because they are the experts. So if we were able to use big data to say, hey, little Johnny is now in the 10th grade, but they have the propensity to become a future social worker. So let's help them identify the scholarships that can get them into a bachelor's level program, and then sort of cultivate their learning through working with counselors, so that at each end of the point, and if you really wanted to extend it, identify future politicians, but I won't go there in terms of that. But I think there's a lot of this potential in terms of what we could use for the public good.
I think that's what I was saying too, just around using predictive data.
Yeah. Great. Right.
Yeah, I think OpenGov will be really cool in 10 years too. So I think where we see things going is with the network effect, as I mentioned earlier. As government data, budget analysis grows, just our database alone can provide a proxy for government, the state of local government in the United States with respect to budget, spend, financial health, and so forth. And then extrapolating that, forecasting out, have we seen this kind of trend before, and can we make any predictions and do some kind of comparisons to make course corrections to prevent something like the Great Recession from happening again?
All right, exciting stuff. So I want to open it up to the audience. Questions? Yes, sir, in the back there. Oh, sure.
Hi. Oh, hi. Question for the second panelist. You talked about opting out of data. We had an earlier speaker who was citing a book called Nudge, and that one relates to what you were talking about. It introduces a concept called paternalistic libertarianism, and that really has to do with choices. And I think your comments kind of get to the fundamental difference, though. Opt-in versus opt-out. And is there a model, a successful model, where this works for data collection, where opt-in becomes the default as opposed to opt-out? Because I think with opt-out, it requires a level of sophistication and understanding for you to even know what choices are available to you. When you're opting into something, it's generally an informed decision.
Let me know if this answers your question. So a lot of the things that we're thinking about right now in terms of political engagement, we just want to talk to people who are going to vote in terms of saving money and doubling our impact. And so if you opt into the political process, if you come to an event, if you're in this room right now, you are definitely informed, and you're more likely to vote, more likely to tell your friends about current events. And therefore, by focusing on the people who have opted into the process, that's a high quality audience. Like what we're doing with Agree to See. So I agree with you. And so I think that that's sort of where we're going to move towards into the future.
Can I ask Diane to answer the same question and say,
Great.
is Waze an opt-in or an opt-out? And which I already know the answer, so maybe I'll ask the second part too, which is, could it ever work if it was an opt-in model?
So on the highly social stuff, it is opt-in, just so we're clear. Could it work if it were an opt-in model? I think by the fact that you download Waze, that's like a pretty aggressive thing you have to do to opt in. And when you talk to our users, the first thing they're going to say is, "Oh, and I'm sharing with my community too, so everyone else is going to know, where the accident is." So I think we are at front and center a community product, and we never hide that. That's always front and center. You open the map and you see the little Wazers all over it. It's exactly about not being alone in the road. And if you don't like that, you won't use us. That's the difference between the private and the public, is we have to keep proving every day that there's value in that. Otherwise, people will stop using us.
Questions? Yes, ma'am. In the center.
I do want to give a shout out about the Waze. I use it all the time.
That's great.
But my question is about Waze. You talk about the government agencies and how they're going to be able to utilize that. Could you elaborate a little bit about how you see that there's a collaboration? Maybe the public work projects, and just really simple, this is very fundamental, is public work or PG&E work or something like that, that you can input that, but does that come from the local agencies using the app and giving the input just like any other users, or do you see other functions that the local municipalities can utilize your app?
So the program is a data exchange where they actually have an API where they're getting feeds of all of the incidents and closures that are happening. And then in exchange, they're giving us the incidents and closures as well. So it is a data stream going both directions right now, and they don't have to use the app like everybody else. They decide how it's visualized in their traffic management centers. And the other cool thing that's not just about the data sharing, it's about getting the people together. There's a forum where people are sharing best practices. They're sharing code, the government agencies, because no one can afford to write all of the scripts to access data in different ways. And so they're actually sharing with one another. And I think they're learning a ton. And that, for me, is building the community within the agencies themselves, across agency. It's pretty cool. Related to public works, you know, it's very difficult. In LA, for example, until Peter Marks became the CTO of the city, there wasn't a single public works feed. He had to go and hunt it down across multiple agencies, and then ultimately he was able to create one. But every city is in such a different, fragmented state. But the basic idea is, let's get the information to the governments however they want them, and then we'll take them however they can. We used to have somebody who sent us faxes. They don't anymore. Phew, yeah.
Question over here.
Yes, I'm new to the concept of how much is in a voter file. I don't know anything about that as an average citizen. I have no election experience. And I heard you say that the way you vote historically is in your voter file, and that's public information through an information request. Could you explain what's in a voter file?
So every county is different. I would say I used to say I was a closet data nerd, but I guess the cat's out of the bag now. But the San Francisco voter file, for example, has really clean data and a lot of like different data points. Not how you vote is public record. It's just, did you cast a ballot? Some count, and it's very different at the county by county level. There's some counties that record if your gender, and there's some counties that don't. Some record your birthday, some don't. So it's very different per county.
That you voted.
That you voted. Some collect email addresses and phone numbers, some don't. But your address is mandatory.
Yeah, speaking as an elected official, just to follow up, in San Mateo County, it does have your age, your gender, your party affiliation, and whether or not you voted. And the whether or not you voted is the key piece of data that campaigns use to determine, is somebody a likely voter or not? Do they have a propensity for voting in the past, and are they likely to vote in the future? Other questions? Yes, sir, Ernie.
So this is questions for you, Deanne. So I recently got back from Hawaii, and my wife and I are big Wazers. As a matter of fact,
I love this room. I love this room.
Yeah. And but she gets very excited because of the rewards that she gets, because she reports everything, and when she's a passenger, oh my, there's a police officer there, how exciting. And but when we went to Hawaii, there was no Wazers. And both of us got excited when she said, oh my God, I found a Wazer, let's see if we can find, see him on the road. But the question is this, how do you, are there challenges or opportunities that you guys are finding out there in different areas that you're just not able to get people getting on Waze, and how do you overcome that?
That's the biggest part of my job. But yeah, I mean, first of all, it correlates with how bad traffic is. If you're in an area where traffic is bad, you're likely to have a good population of Wazers, right? More than 30% of drivers in LA use Waze, for example. Huge populations. Sao Paulo is our #1 city in terms of Waze use because traffic is just so bad. So that's going to be one. You need to believe that that it's going to solve a problem for you. So traffic is the one. The other thing is, what makes something take off, especially crowdsourced, where that's so important in a specific community. And for example, in Italy, I can trace our organic huge lift to one blog post by one blogger who was just that influential. And then in other areas, we have to work harder. We have a broadcast program where we work with TV stations where they can give their traffic reporting using Waze information. So we do a lot of work we're trying to create the awareness and then hope that's going to translate into finding maybe not just the pure traffic need, but the sharing weather information about road weather and dangerous areas that might not have a lot of traffic. Flooding, Southeast Asia, we have a lot of people who are using Waze because of concerns about flooding and those alerts being pushed through the app. So we're always looking for new ways to figure out what do people need on the road and can we provide that service.
And then one thing I'd love to add that you brought up is this idea of gamification with like the rewards. Now imagine if you had a government and a private partnership with Waze, for example, where the government side could incentivize everybody to go find all the potholes and lay a marker on them and hopefully could fill them faster than they would do it by themselves. And then by sort of leveraging all this, big data and open data, you can make government more efficient and smarter and that sort of thing.
And DC did a piece of that too, where for a 2-week period of time called Pothole Palooza, if you marked your pothole in Waze, they fixed it within 48 hours. So this is the kind of response we're looking for, and that's what we hope is going to bring the citizens and the cities together.
Great. All right, we are out of time. So I want to thank our panelists. Please join me in giving them a round of applause. And we will turn it back over to Kevin.
Thank you very much, Cameron. On our panel, we're just going to take about a 10-minute break. At 1:40, we're going to reconvene for our Connect Talks section. Thank you again to our panel.